Each night, a candle is lit, and the whispering tomes open. Inside are the strange, the forgotten, the stories time tried to silence. Some say history is written by the victors, but here the lost are given voice. Breathe deeply and follow me into the hidden chapters of history.
The Devil's Bible, the true story behind the Codex Gigas, candlelight at the turning page. Rain ticks against stone. A candle threads light across a face with horns and wide eye. Your hand hovers over a page, half turned. The portrait seems to glint, as if breathing in the flame. People called this the Devil's Bible. The book is so large, it once survived a palace fire because someone threw it from a window to save it. Who made this Codex Gigas? And why bind salvation and science in one skin? Here, fear, faith, and the cost of knowledge live on the same page. Tonight, calm and grounded, we open this forbidden history. We continue. The world that birthed a giant monastic Bohemia. Have you ever wondered what kind of world could raise a book so vast? Tonight, we start in Bohemia, in a small Benedictine house at Pedlavis. Not a rich abbey, a modest one. Fields that leaned on thin soil, a routine marked by bells. Before dawn, the monks rose for prayer. Prime, terce, sext, nonnas braided through the day. Between them, work, and in a quiet room they called the scriptorium. The air held a hush like snow. Books here were more than objects. They were labor made holy. Calfskin was scraped into vellum, pale and smooth. The surface coaxed flat with a lunellum blade. Quills were cut from goose feather at a steep angle so the tip could feed ink in a steady stream. That ink brewed from oak galls, iron salts, and gum, dried into a brown black that bit into the page. Craft wasn't separate from devotion. It was devotion. Each line a prayer. Each margin a margin of the soul. The scribe's role sat under obedience. Accuracy meant fidelity to the word and to the house. Mistakes brought penance, fasts, extra prayer, or copying lines again until the hand remembered in those long margins. Though you sometimes meet small debates, a correction, a pointing hand, a short note to catch a reader's eye. Even quiet places carry voices. You can feel it in the way a line leans, how a rubric, the red heading whispers, where to look next. Justice and superstition lived side by side. If a brother failed in duty, there were tariffs of penance, measured and known. Yet rumor moved through cloisters like a draught under the door. A sudden illness could be called a sign. A crop failure might stir talk of sin. In close communities, stories start small and grow. A warning, a wonder, a tale told at dusk to make sense of what hurts. Legends take root where lives are tight and time is slow. The social world outside the walls pressed hard. Famine cycles came with harsh winters and thin summers. Local lords levied dues. The church held land and law, and the monastery, though poor, stood as a broker of relief and order. Knowledge meant survival, which saints' days guided planting, which cures eased a fever, which rules kept peace when bread ran short. A book wasn't a luxury, it was a tool and a tether to meaning. Early literacy worked in layers. Many could not read the letters, but they read the book aloud with their ears. Chant carried scripture. Sermons translated law into stories. Images taught, too. A bright initial with a serpent coiled in the letter S. A saint holding a palm branch. A small diagram showing what sin owed what penance. The manuscript served as communal memory. A page held more than text. It held the rhythm of a place. Now think about what it costs to create a giant. Calfskin requires calves, many calves. In a poor house, that meant planning, saving, and favors. It meant a network donations, trades, and appeals to patrons. The making pooled on the whole region. Even if only one hand wrote the words, you feel the economy in the quiet, the careful reuse of offcuts as guards, the neat repairs stitched into tears, the way nothing is wasted unless it must be. Take a breath. The Benedictine rule asked for stability, obedience, and conversion of life. Stability didn't mean stillness. It meant rootedness. A long project could be a path to that root. A scribe learned to sit inside patience. Day after day, pricking the leaf with a compass point to mark lines. Ruling faint grooves with a stylus. Setting the choir those small gatherings of folded sheets into sequence. There's a calm that comes from order. It's the same calm you feel when you fold a blanket to its edge. In a setting like Padlavus, authority also watched. An abbot weighed needs, bread, wax, ink, labor. A giant book wasn't a whim. It was a statement of hope and standing. A compendium that could carry scripture, history, medicine, and rules in one binding. To copy such a thing said, we belong to a world of learning, even if our fields are thin. It was a claim and a prayer, wrapped together. Meanwhile, winters taught thrift. Candles burned low. Hands grew cold. A quill split at the tip at the worst time. You can see the human in those small flaws. A line dips. A letter grows thicker. A rubric runs out of red and finishes in brown. None of it points to failure. It points to presence, the way a long breath sometimes wavers but continues. Rumor, devotion, hunger, and patience, these currents shaped the monk who would sit with the vellum and begin. You and I can't hear his voice, but we can read his choices. He ruled wide columns to hold long texts. He left generous margins, maybe to invite glosses later. He balanced economy with clarity. You can tell he planned for a book to be used, not just admired. And in the evenings, the bell called again, Compline, night prayers. The community folded the day into silence. Beyond the walls, a road sank into mud. In the kitchen, broth simmered thin. In the scriptorium, a sheet waited under a board, resting flat, ready for morning. Somewhere in that stillness, a giant took its first shape not as a myth, but as a plan. In this silence, a story forms a monk, a sentence, and a deadline. Take a breath. The legend of the pact, one night, one soul. Now the whisper that follows the Codex Gigas, wherever it goes. A monk condemned, a sentence too heavy to bear, and a vow made in the darkest hour. You've heard it in pieces. He promises to create a book that will serve the monastery forever, to redeem himself by dawn. One night, one soul. When despair meets a clock, people invent help. The legend moves like an old song. A man alone in his cell, walls close and cold. He scratches the first lines, sees the scale, and knows he can't finish by morning. Midnight drags. He prays, then stops. He calls to a power that answers quickly. The night bends. Ink runs like water from a spring. The pages fill. When morning comes, the book is there, vast, flawless, terrifying, and in the middle, a portrait of the one who helped. That's the core pattern, an impossible feat, aid from the wrong place, and proof that no one can deny. It's the anatomy of a folk tale built to warn and explain. The warning says, don't ask for shortcuts in holy work. The explanation says, when something looks beyond human, we suspect a hand we shouldn't trust. You feel how it speaks to fear and awe at the same time. Across Europe, you find cousins of this story. Bridges finished overnight because a builder pledged the first soul to cross. Cathedrals made safe by a bargain carved into a cornerstone. Time traded for skill, craft traded for rescue. The bargain never ends cleanly. The price comes due in a twist-an. Animal crosses first, or a trick spares a life, and the helper hates the ruse. These echoes show a shared anxiety. Talent needs time. If you skip the time, you risk more than failure. You risk yourself. Why did this legend stick to the Codex Gigas? Because the book feels superhuman. Its size alone pushes belief. The steady hand across so many pages, no drift into wildness, no collapse into fatigue feels like a spell, and the contents aren't light. Scripture and law and history and medicine bound together suggest a mind that didn't sleep. When people see work that vast, they ask if pride drove it, and if pride did, where it leads. Here's the calm truth, backed by the page itself. Paleography, the study of handwriting, shows a single primary hand working in a consistent rhythm. The letter forms hold together. They shift slowly over long stretches as a person ages or as tools change, not as a team rotates. Codicology, the study of the book's builder lines, with a long project, not a night's miracle. Choirs line up, rulings stay steady, corrections appear in sensible places. You're looking at decades, it seems, not dawn to dawn. So the pact softens into metaphor. It still matters because it points to something human, the wish to bypass the hard part. Guilt can make you want rescue at any cost. Ambition can make you reach for a lever that moves the world without moving your own muscles. The story says, be careful. It also says, admit you're tempted. Both lessons ride with the devil's face in the middle. Speaking of that face, the legend claims the portrait is a signature, the helper's receipt. But the image sits within a moral frame that fits the age. Paradise on one side, the devil on the other. A choice, not a boast. When you read it that way, the pact turns into a pause for conscience. The page becomes a mirror, not a contract. Listen to how the legend is told in cloister and kitchen. A lay brother lowers his voice and lingers on the part where the candles blew back at once. A novice asks if the monk's chains fell open at dawn. Someone laughs softly, uneasy. A story like this is a tool for talking about fear. It lets you say the thing without naming your own dread. It keeps a group alert. There's also a practical layer. In small communities, reputation and caution mattered. A tale about shortcuts, police's behavior when no one wants open conflict. If a brother grows too proud of his work, the packed story nudges him back into humility. If a patron demands a deadline no one can meet, the tale pushes back. You don't want that kind of book. Meanwhile, the evidence remains patient. The same careful spacing. The same ink tone through long runs, with changes that match normal batch mixing. Later editions in a different hand, but the body stable. You can picture a monk who woke early, prayed, and copied until his eyes blurred, then stopped day after day. That's the real shape behind the legend. So keep the legend where it belongs, in the listening corner where fear and wonder sit. It adds mood, not proof. It reminds you that people reach for demons when they meet the edge of skill. And it helps you feel the book is more than paper. It becomes a drama about will and time. If not a bargain, then a marathon. One patient hand, a life measured in lines, a giant raised very slowly. The legend gives you the night, but the truth gives you the years. Hold both for a moment. Let the story warn you, and let the page steady you. We continue. Building a monster book. Materials and method. Now we stand at the workbench. You feel the scale first. The Codex Gigas is vastal like a small door, wide enough to need both arms. To fill it, about 160 animal skins were turned into vellum. That means herds behind the pages. Calf skin soaked in lime, hair loosened, stretched on a frame, then scraped again and again until the sheet sang under the knife. Smooth where flesh once lay, rougher on the hair side. No waste if it could be helped, only gradual thinning, patching, and saving off cuts for guards. Evidence of a single scribe runs through the book like a steady heartbeat. The letterforms keep their family likeness over hundreds of leaves, the thickness of strokes, the way a serif flares. The rhythm between words, these habits evolve slowly. You can watch the hand mature. Early leaves show a slightly more angular touch. Later leaves relax. Spacing opens by a hair. Corrections find a neater form. This isn't a team. It's one person's muscle memory getting better at the same time. The workflow begins with pricking. A point marks the margins and baselines along the edges. Then ruling. A stylus or lead draws faint lines across the sheet so rows won't drift downhill. Next, the quire. Several sheets folded and nested. A small unit the scribe could hold in mind and in hand. Writing moves quire by quire, column by column. Ink mixed from oak galls, iron sulfate, and gum sits to rest, so bubbles settle. The quill is cut, tested, cut again. Routine rules the day. A page is a field to be ploughed straight. Pigments add restraint more than spectacle. Verdigris offers a cool green for initials and borders. Red lead gives a warm red for rubrics, those small headings that steer the reader. A wash of yellow grounds pattern work. Modest gold appears sparingly, if at all. This is not a jeweled gospel. It's a compendium. Decoration serves clarity, not show. The color tells you what's next, where a section starts, where a voice changes. Even the devil portrait, later, sits on a flat green field bold, simple, unforgettable. Time flexes in the materials. Vellum needs to rest after scraping, so tension evens out. A scribe must pause for ink to dry in a humid room, or it will offset onto the facing page. Fatigue forces breaks. Holidays and fasts interrupt. Repairs appear where edges tore during stretching, or where holes opened in thin spots. Sometimes the text bends to avoid a flaw, curving a line around a translucent eye in the skin. Years pass inside those tiny decisions. Decades, likely. The pace is patient because it has to be. Turn a page in your mind. Hear the drag, like a low breath. The sheet resists and then yields. Dust rises where the knife once scraped. Edges show a bruise where boards pressed hard during binding. This is physical drama. A book like this can't be rushed without leaving scars. When you feel that drag, you feel the work of the animal, the tenor, the scribe, the binder, all at once. It anchors the myth to earth. Labor holds. You see human corrections that speak plainly. A skipped line gets a caret mark. A repeated phrase is cancelled with a neat set of dots. A letter inverted is overscraped and rewritten with careful ink, the surface lightly burnished to take the stroke. These aren't signs of haste or panic. They're the normal tidying of a mind that rotates itself. The rhythm is calm. Problems are caught where they happen, not pages later. Layout choices echo intent. 2 columns for dense text keep the eye from traveling too far in a single sweep. Generous margins leave room for later notes, or for the hand to hold the leaf without covering word. Chapter initials grow just enough to guide without shouting. Running heads and small clues orient a reader who may be tired, reading by candle, or teaching aloud to a small group. The design invites use. It's kinder than legend suggests. Binding brings all this mass into one body. Wooden boards, thick and plain, take the weight. A leather covering stretches across the spine and is pegged or stitched to hold. Clasps keep the text block tight, so humidity won't wave the leaves into ripples. Over centuries, those clasps strain. They break. They're replaced. You can read the life of the book in metal scars along the edges. Every fix marks a season. People sometimes ask if the materials were special. They weren't, in a magical sense. They were standard for the period, just multiplied. The ink is the ink of charters and psalters. The vellum is the vellum of Bibles and law books. The pigments are the pigments of ordinary devotion. What turns ordinary into wonder here is scale and continuity. One method, kept for a very long time, becomes a monument. Imagine the scribe's day like, stacking stones across a stream. One, then another, then a third. Nothing fancy, just steady placements until a path appears. The Codex Gigas carries that feeling. The pricking holes line up. The rulings hold the rows. The letter height hums like a chant. When a break in pace shows, it's because life happened illness, supply trouble, a season of travel. Then the line resumes where it left off. You can trust the craft because it explains itself. No supernatural skin. No ink brewed from forbidden ash. Just the quiet, repeatable steps of medieval making, stretched to the limit of patience. Now open the giant not to myth, but to what it actually says. Let the page rest. Inside the giant, a library bound as one. Now open the giant and read its mind. At the center sits the full Vulgate Bible, the Latin scripture that set the tone of worship and learning for centuries. It isn't a sampler, it's the whole spin Genesis through the prophets, the Gospels through Revelation ordered, for a reader who teaches, preaches, and studies. You can hear the cadence of liturgy in its chapters. A monk could anchor daily readings here, then step into debate with the text steady beneath his feet. But the Bible is only the beginning. Speaking of time and empire, the Codex includes Josephus, the Jewish historian whose works helped place sacred events within Roman history. That pairing matters. It says, Scripture lives in a world of emperors, wars, and cities. You're invited to see sacred time threaded through civic time, the way a river runs through a plain. This helps a reader answer questions from layfolk. When did this happen? And under which ruler? And why did it matter? Turn the leaf and you meet care for boat ease. Medical texts fill sections with recipes, lists, and short notes that come from learned medicine and practice. You'll find humoral theory, the old balance of blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile used as a framework. But theory bends toward remedy. Simple pharmacology appears, herbs, resins, wines, and honeys, written in calm prose. A fever gets a cool draught. A wound takes a salve. The hand that wrote scripture also copied cures, because a community needed both prayer and poultice, net, rules, and repentance. Penitentials sit like ledgers of the soul. They list sins and their tariffs of penance fests, alms. Pilgrimages saw confessors could guide without guesswork. Alongside, you'll see monastic rules and canons. This is where social order meets conscience. A reader can move from law to mercy within a few pages. The book becomes a bench for judgment and a bench for healing. It keeps people together by naming what went wrong and how to mend it. Time itself gets bound here. Calendars lay out saints' days, feasts, and fasts. Local rhythms appear in simple lists. What's marked in this region? Which observances matter most? When to begin Lent? When to expect Easter? Those calendars are more than dates. They're anchors. A village watches the year through them, planting after a feast, resting on a holy day, gathering from markets synced to church time. In the quiet columns, life finds a pattern that steadies hunger and hope. You'll also find lists and notes that act like a pocket map of knowledge. Short chronicles, genealogies, and small registers keep memory tidy. Then, crucially, a Bohemian chronicle gives the book a home address. It names local rulers and events, pulling the giant down from abstraction into a place you can stand. This grounds the Codex not as a wandering marvel, but as a regional library. People here saw themselves inside it. The way these parts sit together tells you the plan. This isn't a random pile. It's a deliberate braid, soul, body, and state. A reader can move from a psalm to a page on fevers, then to a tariff of penance, then to a date in the calendar, then to a story about kings. Education in this age meant knowing how each strand fit the rest. The Codex Gigas does that job in one binding. You can teach a novice from it, comfort a sick brother, set a sermon, settle a quarrel, and plan a feast day, all without leaving the desk. Look at how the text signals shifts. Rubrics in red whisper a new section. Larger initials mark the start of a book. Margins leave room for notes. Some later hands add cross-references. Some add brief clarifications. It's a living book that expects company. The scribe's clarity makes it easier for others to join the conversation across time. That's why people call it a compendium. It condenses a working library into a single, reachable place. Because it's complete, it reflects a worldview intact. The sacred does not sit apart from the practical. The cure and the commandment belong together. The history that explains your present meets the calendar that tells you when to fast. Nothing feels forbidden here by default. Instead, caution comes from orders. Read well. Apply wisely. Keep pride low. That's the tune beneath the lines. It's not a grimoire whispering secret power. It's a handbook for a house determined to keep faith and livelihood in balance. Think about how a listener would meet this book. A monk reads aloud by candle. A brother who can't read letters still learns the patterns what page to open on a saint's day. Which section holds advice for a persistent cough? Where to find the rule that answers a dispute? The Codex works like a town square. People gather around it, each taking what they need, all within earshot of the same source. And as you turn, a single image waits to split the flow. Between heaven and hell, a figure looks back with horns and claws on a flat green field. The most famous face in the manuscript, often misunderstood. We'll pause there soon. For now, hold the shape of this library bound as one. Bible, history, medicine, penance, calendar, chronicle. A whole world folded into leaves, aligned to be used, remembered and feared just enough to keep the hands steady. We continue. The devil's portrait, icon, warning, or confession. Now we reach the image that halts the breath. A horned figure with claws sits alone on a field of flat green. Its eyes are wide, its mouth set between teeth that catch candlelight. The body looks compressed, almost boxed, bordered by patterned frames. On facing leaves in other parts of the book, paradise blooms with small, ordered forms. Here, the ground is simple, like a stage. You turn the leaf, and the room seems to lean toward it. Let's read the icon first, the way a medieval viewer likely did. Horns signal rebellion. Claws mark the predator. The squat pose suggests confinement, not triumph. The green ground, unshaded and plain, avoids the illusion of depth. It's a moral diagram, not a portrait from life. This is an emblem you can memorize and carry to a sermon, a reminder of what disordered love looks like when shown as a body. Nothing about it invites worship. Everything about it invites caution. Iconography in this era loved clear markers. Artists borrowed from sermons, and from Bessieres those small moralized animal books to teach with shape and line. The devil often wears animal parts, because vice deforms. A human face becomes a mask for greed, rage, or deceit. The point isn't fear for fear's sake. It's recognition. When you see the claws, you should think about grasping. When you see the horns, you should think about defiance. The image translates doctrine into a glance. Why place it here, in a compendium known for balance and breadth? Several calm theories fit the page. One reads the portrait as a pause for reflection. After long stretches of sacred text and order, you meet a stark warning. Knowledge without humility courts disaster. The image breaks the flow like a bell. Another view treats it as a guard against pride. In a house that copied scripture and law, the greatest danger was self-satisfaction. A devil at the center says, "Stay small." A third reading sees a visual exorcism. To name and depict a threat is to bound it. The frame becomes a pen. Candles make this effect stronger. In low light, the white of the eyes and the small points of teeth return the flame. A reader in the night would feel watched, and that feeling would fix the lesson. Memory needs a hook. The portrait supplies it through contrast green against parchment, teeth against shadow. It's practical pedagogy. You don't forget the page that looks back. Meanwhile, you keep hearing the claim that this is a signature of a pact, inked as a receipt for a soul. But the book's language and layout don't support that. There's no hidden acrostic that calls a name. No marginal note that hints at a bargain. The style sits squarely within didactic artimages, built to teach, not to hint at private deals. The most sensible reading is the simplest. This is a warning set where it won't be missed. Psychology adds another layer. Fear, handled in ritual and image, becomes a tool rather than a blunt threat. To face the devil on the page is to feel a manageable shiver. You're not in a vision, you're in a room with brothers. You can close the leaf after the lesson. That rhythm, confront, breathe, continue helps a community practice courage. It's like rehearsing a fire drill. You stage the danger to carry calm into the real thing. Notice the restraint. There's no lavish gold halo inverted into mockery. No chaos of flames. The flatness quiets the scene. That calm makes the warning sharper. The maker trusts the reader to understand without spectacle. In a way, the portrait honors the mind of the house. It assumes they can think, compare, and choose. Placement matters as a ritual, too. A reader might turn to this page during teaching on sin or during readings tied to temptation narratives. The image becomes a cross-reference in paint. If you talk about greed, you can point to the claws. If you talk about pride, you can point to the horns. The page works like a miniature sermon outline held in the hand. And then there's the neighbor image, paradise. When seen together in sequence, paradise and the devil form a fold-out moral choice. One side shows order, light, and the promise of rest. The other shows distortion and grasp. The pairing says, "You walk between these every day. Choose your company." That juxtaposition softens rumor and sharpens practice. It pulls the myth into discipline, to portrait, and tells the story too fast. He misses the teaching and sells the shock. Over time, the nickname Devil's Bible sticks because the face is easy to remember. But when you sit with a page, you feel the opposite of glamour. You feel supervision. You feel a hand on your shoulder saying, "Steady." So is it an icon, a warning, or a confession? It can be all three without contradiction. Icon, because it distills a complex idea into a few lines you can recall by heart. Warning, because it sits where no reader can slip past it. Confession, because any community honest about its frailty names its enemies within and without. The portrait is the house telling itself the truth aloud. Hold the leaf a moment longer. Hear the soft scrape as it settles back. The devil remains on the page. You remain in the room. That gap is the lesson. Fear acknowledged, then held at a safe distance. Images travel with stories, and this one traveled through fire and siege. Take a breath. Courts of curiosity. Prague and the collector's gaze. While that image settled in minds, the world around it shifted. Monasteries rose and sank with fortune. Houses were dissolved, reformed, or folded into larger networks. In Bohemia, manuscripts could move as assets, pledges, or gifts. The Codex Gigas, heavy as a trunk, joined this traffic of learning. When a small house loses patronage or seeks favor, a grand book becomes a bridge. It travels because reputation travels with it. Prague drew such bridges. Courts loved marvels. Scholars, clerics, and officials gathered in rooms lined with cabinets, each drawer holding a curiosity shells, minerals, mechanical toys, odd bones, rare coins, and, above all, rare texts. Books were not just for reading. They were for display, debate, and status. A visitor could be led to a table where a single manuscript lay, opened to a page meant to provoke a question. The devil portrait did that job without effort. Speaking of curiosity, alchemy and astrology mingled with theology and law at court. Not as wild counter-realities, but as part of a period's attempt to map the whole. Learned medicine leaned on the stars for timing. Natural philosophy probed matter for hidden order. A giant compendium fit this mood because it modeled breath. Place a Bible next to Josephus, then a medical tract, then a penitential, and you mirror a cabinet of wonders inside one binding. A ruler could point to it and say, "Here is a kingdom of knowledge at rest. Provenance leaves threads you can follow." Inventories that list a great Bible with histories, loans marked in a clerk's hand. Political shifts that moved whole libraries from one arm of power to another. A manuscript like this gathers meanings as it gathers stamps. Some called it miracle, some called it monument, some simply called it useful. The words you use change with where you stand. A monk says compendium. A courtier says marvel. A treasurer says asset. This is where rumor sharpened into branding. Visitors passed through Prague, saw the famous portrait, and carried the nickname Devil's Bible to the next hall. That name stuck because it was quick, but inside the court, the value wasn't sorcery. It was range. Learned guests tested their Latin against its pages. Physicians compared notes with its recipes. Preachers checked a reading. Courtiers, eager to seem informed, learned to turn to the right folio on cue. The book trained attention. Meanwhile, a quieter truth persisted. The Codex wasn't a grimoire. The contents argued against that. A grimoire, in the strict sense, is small, practical, and often latter lists of conjurations, names, circles, instructions. The giant in Prague is almost the opposite. Orthodox, didactic, public-facing. Courtly fascination with alchemy might have tinted the air, but the book's spine stayed plain. People valued it as a wonder of scope and a trustworthy library, not as a spellbook. Unknown to them, Across town, a parish priest might have preached from memories trained by the same texts. That's the social life of the book. Elites turned the same pages that peasants heard summarized by voice. When a duke leaned over a calendar to ask about a feast, his question echoed a woman in a market asking which day to fast. The Codex linked rooms that never met. Collectors also loved to catalogue. Lists were power. If you could name what you owned and where it sat, you could prove stewardship and taste. The Codex Gigas, due to its size, simplified that brag. You didn't misplace it. When it entered a catalogue, it often sat first in the largest and most notable slot, a herald that set the tone for the rest. It made other entries look small but precious, like coins around a standard. Courtly rooms shaped how the public saw learning, an exhibition in a great hall, a reading staged for envoys, a whispered tour. At dusk these moments recast a monastic tool as a civic treasure. The book learned new manners. Pages were turned for effect. The devil leaf was treated like a curtain reveal. The audience leaned in, then straightened, alert and pleased to be slightly unnerved. Curiosity, well managed, made ally that leads us to patronage. A court that admired a book might promise funds, protection, or repairs. Bindings could be strengthened, clasps replaced, a handsome stand built. The Codex likely benefited from such practical courtly care at different stops in its journey, each fix adding a layer of biography. You read those in iron scars and in tidy backing. Even admiration becomes physical over time. Inventory notes show a second truth. Loans risk loss. Books travel to be shown, and sometimes they don't return. Politics tilt. A siege threatens. A patron dies. An heir prefers horses to books. A clerk miscopies. A shelf marked. This is how treasures drift. Prague's culture of display exposed the Codex to both fame and hazard. Visibility protects and endangers at once. And yet, through that gaze, the Codex deepened its role as symbol. It became shorthand for learned power, for a city that could host scholars and conjure awe with a single turn of a page. When people spoke of Prague's libraries, they pointed to the giant, even if they'd only seen a sketch. The idea of it did work across distances. But everything was about to change when war pressed against the city walls. Cabinets emptied into wagons. Clerks packed crates by candle, marking lists with shaking hands. Collectors' gazes hardened into claims. In the reaching hands of armies, books turned into reparations and proof of victory. The Codex Gigas, still the largest voice in any room, would be spoken for by a different flag. We continue. War spoil, seized in the 30 Years' War. While Prague admired its wonders, a long war ground across Europe like a millstone. The 30 Years' War didn't just take lives, it uprooted memory. In 1648, as the conflict clawed toward its bitter end, Swedish forces pushed on Prague, aiming not only at walls, but at prestige. Armies knew that books especially rare once could be trophies as potent as cannons. Cabinets were emptied with ledgers open. The Codex Gigas sat too large to miss, whose stakes were human and cultural at once. A city feared famine, plague, and disorder. A kingdom feared a future without its anchors. To lose a manuscript wasn't only to lose paper. It was too thin, the thread that tied sermons to calendars, healers to remedies, rulers to precedents. For the people whose lives moved by those guides, the loss felt personal. A widow lighting a candle for a saint's day kept time with a page she might never see, but that still shaped her world. Then action. Swedish troops, tasked with gathering reparations, followed orders that blended punishment with acquisition. Treasuries fell first, plate, coin, jewels, then libraries. Clerks packed crates while officers read lists. Wagons groaned. The largest volumes required teams. Imagine 3 men lifting the Codex Gigas with a grunt, angling it through a doorway not meant for such weight. The room that had once staged wonder, now staged removal. Quiet was replaced by boots and commands. Meanwhile, in another building, a scribe who knew the book's pages could only watch. Protest would be useless. Lists were legal instruments as much as inventories. This seizure aimed to transform knowledge into credit compensation for years of war. What nobody knew at the time was how well the book would serve the politics of its new home. For now, it was just mass with a reputation. This was the moment everything changed for the Codex's meaning. In Prague, it had stood as a symbol of collected learning. Under a different flag, it would become proof of victory and a seed for national pride. The transfer to Stockholm was both brute fact and cultural theatre. The voyage itself turned the book into a story. A giant crossing the Baltic, secured under tarpaulins, its boards straining against ropes with each swell. Salt air and damp threatened more than curses ever did. In the aftermath, Stockholm's collections swelled. Spoils reshaped national libraries. A state that could show a visitor a giant manuscript could claim a role as guardian of learning. Scholars were invited to inspect, catalogers measured, a new shelf mark replaced an old one. Access changed too. Court and academy negotiated who could touch, who could cite, who could display, and when. Display loves drama. Preservation loves quiet. The book now lived between those two demands. Here's where myths reach for easy answers. People later said the Devil's Bible carried a curse that doomed those who moved it. But the real threats were ordinary and relentless. Damp that swells vellum into waves. Fire that leaps faster than thought. Neglect that breaks a clasp. Carelessness that tears a corner. Conservation is a fight with air and time, not with omens. The Codex endured because hands, sometimes the same hands that seized it also stabilized it. Symbol and trope he layered on each other. In speeches, the Codex stood for learned Sweden, a country that could not only win battles, but also steward the spoils into a wider vision of culture. In Prague, its absence became a wound, retold in laments and lists of losses. A single object can carry opposite meanings depending on which city names it. That's the strange life of war spoil. It creates pride in one place and hunger in another. Archive realities asserted themselves with practical questions. How do you shelve a book that dwarfs the case? How do you allow study without shaving years off its life? Do you open the devil portrait when dignitaries arrive, or keep it closed to slow light damage? Every answer wrote new marks into the Codex's biography. Hinges were adjusted. Leather was treated. Edges gathered small bruises that tell a conservator exactly how it was moved. Think of the people touching it then. A soldier, proud and tired, remembers the weight in his arms. A clerk copies a title in neat script, pleased to slot a marvel into order. A priest stands back, conflicted, seeing a sacred compendium in a foreign hall. That's the social field around the object, the ripples that never quite settle. Books don't just sit. They influence gestures, words, policies. The war's logic tried to treat knowledge as balance in an account, yet the Codex refused to be only accounting. Its contents continued to teach. Scholars in Stockholm read Josephus through its columns, traced calendars, noted penances, compared hands, and argued dates. Even as a spoil, it functioned as a library. That double life trophy and tool kept it visible and thus, paradoxically, protected. By the time peace settled, the Codex Gigas had been re-woven into a new story. It stood in a room where visitors lowered their voices without being told. It taught again under different eyes. It also waited, as all books do, for the next test. Fire would come, and an enormous choice had to be made at a window. Let the ink dry. The palace, fire. Survival by a throw. Now the room is smoke. Heat swells in the walls. You hear timbers crack like bark under ice. It's Stockholm, 1697, and fire runs through the royal castle fast enough to erase a century in an afternoon. In the library, the choice narrows to two verbs, save or watch. A clerk coughs once, covers his mouth, and looks at the biggest thing in the room. Stakes land hard. This isn't just paper. It's sermons that haven't been preached yet, remedies that haven't been tried, rules that settle quarrels before fists rise. A book like this holds a city's memory at arm's length. If arms can lift it, the fear is simple. Let it burn, and you lose a quiet pillar that keeps many days from falling apart. Action accelerate. Alarms are shouted down corridors. Doors slam open as smoke seeks the stair. The library staff does the math in seconds. Small volumes can ride in aprons, medium ones stacked by the window. The Codex Gigas stands stubborn, heavy as a sleeping ox. You can't cradle it. You must commit to it. 2 men try, fail. Then 3 approach with a 4th to help angle it onto a table near the casement. Unknown to them, across the courtyard, another team is making the same triage with maps and ledgers. The tactic is crude but proven. Throw what you can't carry. The sash lifts. Cold air bites through smoke. Outside, rain freckles the stone.
Inside.
Breath runs short. Hands grab boards and leather. 1 man counts 1, 2, 3, and they heave. The Codex slides, hesitates on the sill, then tips into the open. Impact is a story of physics written on the book's body. The clasps meet stone first. 1 warps, 1 snaps. The boards scuff along corners. The tail edge bites gravel. Leaves compress, then spring. It isn't graceful, but it's better than flame. People below scatter and then rush in, dragging the giant away from falling sparks. They pat at embers with cloaks. A guard stamps once on a curling page edge and lifts his boot fast. You feel the aftermath in your hands centuries later. Broken clasps replaced in a plainer style. boards rubbed to a blunt shine at the corners, the leather marked with a long crescent scar, light against dark. Bruised edges whisper the arc of that flight. Books don't heal. They keep their wounds as warnings. This one tells you exactly how close the day came to our. Conservation begins as soon as the smoke clears. The staff sets the codex flat. Boards weighted to keep the text block from twisting while it dries. Damp is a quiet enemy. Vellum swells and cockles if left to wander. Someone opens a few leaves at intervals to prevent block-fusing. Another records damage with calm, notes clasp, lost board abraded, for edge bruised. The work looks like triage, because it is. Debunk the easy tale right here. No miracle pages fluttered untouched through flames. No hand of fate turned the leaf to the devil and held it safe. What saved the codex were human choices made fast. Prioritize, stage at the window, throw. The same hands that once lifted it as a trophy now lifted it as a charge. In chaos, training and care beat superstition every time. Meanwhile, rumor assembles its script outside. Onlookers see large books arc from windows and land in piles that steam in the rain. Someone swears they saw a glow that wasn't fire. Someone else swears the devil himself cushioned the fall with a grin. Stories sprint when fear stops, but step close to the object and the truth is plainer. Metal bent where metal hit. Leather tore where leather scraped. Heat licked edges, but didn't claim the core. That's not omened. That's physics and luck guided by resolve. This day becomes a lesson for future keepers. In workshops, conservators teach with photos of the scars. They explain why clasps matter, how leather shrinks near heat, how quick drying prevents ripples you can never smooth. The codex turns into a textbook for saving other things. Damage becomes data. Care becomes policy. After the fire, the codex lives quieter. Reading rooms replace parade halls. Study replaces display. Scholars request a folio. Staff weigh the ask against the cost. The book responds well to calm. It likes low light, stable air, sure hands. Its body says so. If you listen, you can hear the page settle with gratitude. The throw at the window sits in the spine like a knot pain that held. When you reach that corner and see the rubbed arc, you meet the moment again. People chose quickly and well. That's why you can meet the book at all. After fire, a quieter life reading rooms, studies, and patient scholars. We continue. Science of the hand, paleography, and dating. Tonight we read the scribe through the strokes. Paleography is simply the study of handwriting, how letters form, how they link, how they breathe on the page. When you slow your eye, the Codex Gigas speaks with one voice. The ductus, the movement of the hand, stays steady, verticals drawn with a slight pull, horizontals set with a measured lift, curves meeting at clean angles. Spacing between lines holds a near-constant hum, like steps counted under breath. This is the fingerprint of a single, practiced writer. Stakes first. If many hands made this, the story bends toward workshop and speed. If one hand carried it, The story bends toward endurance and intention. You care because meaning hides in method. A solitary scribe makes the book feel like a lived vow. A team makes it an organized campaign. The page doesn't guess. It shows its maker with thousands of tiny proofs. Action is in the letters. Look at the minims, the short verticals that build M, N, and U in the Codex. Their height balances squarely with ascenders, so rhythm doesn't wobble. Ligature's small ties like C, T, and strit appear in the same places across long stretches, used as habits rather than flourishes. Abbreviations follow the same set, with the same curved mark over a nasal, the same tick for a missing vowel. You see corrections handled in a consistent way. 2. A scraped patch, softened and rinked with a light hand that doesn't gouge. Across hundreds of leaves, this sameness is hard to fake and easy to read. Impact comes from change within control. Over time, the letterforms loosen by a breath. The serif on a tall L relaxes. The bowl of a D rounds slightly. Word spacing opens a hair. These shifts track the slow evolution of a single person, not the hard edges you'd expect when one scribe hands off to another. It's the difference between a tree growing and a fence changing posts. Codicology, how the book is built, backs the hand's story. Quires keep to a regular pattern. Pricking holes align in long runs, suggesting the same tool and the same reach. Ruling stays in register even when sections change content. Leaf after leaf, the skeleton holds. If you've ever lined a notebook and kept it for years, you know how stable that inner grid can be when one mind insists on it. Inks and pigments speak with chemistry. Iron gall ink settles into the parchment with the usual darkening at strokes, edges, where the ink pools. And it ages with a gentle brown shift, not with odd gloss. Red headings use a typical red lead tone. Greens sit in a range consistent with verdigris. Analytical studies of similar manuscripts from the region show matching recipe. You won't find exotic binders or suspicious metallic sheens that would hint at later meddling. The palette echoes its century. Dating folds in more than script. Scholars cross-check the included texts and their versions against known traditions. A copy that includes specific prologues or particular chapter orders helps place the exemplar family, which in turn narrows the window. Calendars and chronicles fix local references that point to a region's timeline. Then science adds another lens. Radiocarbon testing on tiny samples of vellum, interpreted carefully, falls in the 13th century Bohemian range. When independent lines agree hand, build, content, and material you can rest inside the date. Meanwhile, myths try to hide in the margins. Claims of hidden ciphers surface every decade. Steganography, the practice of hiding messages under the obtus, makes for good headlines. But systematic tests, from simple frequency counts to more formal analysis, don't find a coherent code running through the text. The abbreviations are the ordinary ones. The pauses live where Latin breathes. If there's a secret, it's the open one. Patience. Here's where the 30-second rule asks for a detail. Look at the letter G. In this hand, the lower bold sits narrower than the upper, and the ear flicks up at a consistent angle. That tiny habit repeats in the Bible, in Josephus, in the penitentials, in the medical notes. If multiple scribes had split the work, you'd expect a second G with a different jaw, or with a heavier ear. It never arrives. The G is the same companion for miles. Consider the ruling again. Some leaves show dry point lines scored with a stylus that leaves a faint groove. Others reveal a touch of leaf. The switch is rare and gradual, like a toolkit updated, not a bench swapped. That's what a life looks like on a desk. You use what you have until something better comes. Then you fold the new into the old without drama. What nobody knew at the time was how these quiet signs would stand up to modern scrutiny. When ultraviolet light skims the surface, you see the ruled lines glow faintly, the pricking holes pop, the overscraped corrections blush. Nothing jumps out as an anachronism. No modern filler gleams where it shouldn't. The book passes not because it's perfect, but because its flaws are of its time. Impact, again, in the big picture. A single hand over years makes the Codex Gigas a clock you can read for stamina. It shows how a person can hold a style without freezing it, and how a community can back a project without breaking it into shifts. It tells you that scale doesn't require panic, it requires method. So you close this technical leaf with a simple confidence. The science of the hand, the bones of the book, the chemistry of ink, and the cross-check of texts converge. The giant sits in 13th century Bohemia with one calm scribe behind most of its miles. Hidden codes fall away. The visible code remains, line after line, in order, in time. Take a breath. Mind in the margin. Psychology of a monumental task. Tonight we step inside the scribe's head. Monastic solitude wasn't empty. It was structured. Bell set the frame. Prayer set the breath. Work filled the space between. You sit, you rule, you write. The page becomes daily bread, taken in small, steady bites until the leaf is done. Routine isn't a cage, it's an anchor. Stakes feel quiet but heavy. If mind slips, text bends. A miscopied verse ripples into teaching. A wrong dose in a remedy could harm a brother. The scribe carried more than ink. He carried a community's trust. That's why the hands trained attention like a muscle. You learn to notice when your eye grows fuzzy. You stop, sand the line, sharpen the quill, and return. Action lives in tiny rituals. Before dawn, a short prayer for good memory. After prime, pricking and ruling to calm the mind. Copy through terse, with the door ajar to catch fresh air. Midday, rest the eyes on the art. Let green reset the focus. After none, ink mixed and left to settle. At vespers, the day's last lines finished with care, never rushing to the end. These steps aren't superstitions. They are a system that keeps fatigue from driving the pen. Impact shows up as flow, the state where hours dim and the hand moves almost by itself. That flow doesn't come from force, it comes from cues. A clean desk, tools at reach. The next choir waiting, marked and planned. When flow breaks, you don't curse the mind. You change the task, sharpen quills, sort pigments, rub a pumice block lightly over a roughed patch. Switch back when breath evens. This is slow mastery over chaos. Motives blend. Obedience sits first. A rule was a rule. Ambition hums beneath. A grand book raises a house's standing. Penitence might press too. Long labor can be a way to answer a fault. Few lives run on one note. The calm of the hand suggests balance. If pride had ruled, the page would strain for shows. Instead, you find restraint, clarity, and resolve. Here's a small analogy to hold the shape of. Think of crossing a stream by stacking stones. You don't leap the whole span. You place one stone, test its hold, then the next, then another. After a while, you look up and notice there's a path behind you. The Codex Gigas is that crossing. One line placed well, then another, then another. No secrets, just steps you can trace. The mind meets boredom, too. Long lists of names, genealogies that blur, repeated phrases that lull. This is where discipline shows. The scribe uses pacing tricks. Whisper the line under breath. Tap the foot on every fifth word. Trace the serif on an initial with a fingernail for 1 second of reset. Micro-habits keep attention from drifting into error. Companionship matters even in solitude. A novice might enter to trim quills or warm the room. A prior might check progress, praise the steadiness, and leave a small note. Leave wider margin for gloss here. These touches remind the scribe that the book will be read by others, not just measured by pages filled. Purpose refreshes focus better than fear. People like to label such endurance as madness. It isn't. The page denies it. Madness phrase. This work holds. You see control in the way corrections resolve cleanly. In how the same letter sits the same height miles later. In how layout choices stay humane. A mind drowning can't keep a design this kind. What you're witnessing is sustained competence. Stress still vises. A shortage of vellum interrupts rhythm. A winter cough shakes the hand. Candles sputter on damp nights. The scribe answers with adjustments. Write fewer lines, but keep them true. Swap to rubrication tasks when the chest tightens. Stand and stretch. Place a weight on a curling choir. Small saves accumulate into a long win. Meanwhile, the devil portrait waits in the future pages like a test. But the scribe doesn't copy toward dread. He copies toward completeness. The fear sits acknowledged, bracketed by prayer and method. That bracket is the lesson. Meet fear. Set it to the side. Continue the line. The portrait will do its work when its leaf arrives. The mind's work is to be ready. What nobody knew then is how modern language would name these old patterns. Mindfulness for focus. Habit loops for reliability. Task switching for recovery. The monastery built those tools before the terms existed. It trained steadiness as a craft. So you close this inner tour with a steady thought. Great labor didn't require frenzy. It required a room, a rule, and a repeatable day. The mind lived in the margins, alert and calm. The hand followed. The book grew because the moments were kept small and faithful. We continue. Faith, fear, and forbidden pages. Tonight, we open the door between hunger for knowledge and worry about its cost. In the Middle Ages, people named that tension with 2 words, curiositas and studiositas. Curiositas meant restless peeking nose in every cupboard, mind chasing novelty for vanity's sake. Studiositis meant steady seeking, learning ordered toward wisdom, charity, and service. Same tool, different aim. You feel the stakes at once. The Codex Gigas stands where those paths split. Stories carried the warning. Adam reaches for fruit that promises to make him like God, and the garden closes. Builders raise Babel high to grasp the heavens, and their speech shatters. A later age retells Prometheus stealing fire-gain lit by theft, followed by pain. These tales don't hate skill, they fear pride. They whisper that a good gift taken in the wrong spirit burns the hand that holds it. Now look at the Codex as a mediator, not a provocation. On its leaves, sacred law sits beside medical notes, and histories sit beside penitentials. Soul, body, state-braided, not walled off. That layout turns the moral debate into a daily habit. If you need a cure, you find one. If you need a boundary, you find one. If you need a date to shape the week, you find it. Nothing here suggests hoarding secret power. The book serves a community's common good. Still, anxiety hums under utilities. A reader in candlelight might pause at the scope and feel to pause. Comfort in order. The Bible's cadence, the calendar's rhythm, the tariff that maps penance to healing, and anxiety in breadth. So much knowledge in one place can tempt a mind to boast, to treat learning as a ladder climbed for the view. The Codex quietly answers that pull with structure. Rubrics keep you oriented, margins breathe. The design itself says, go slow. This is where forbidden books starts to earn a whisper. Forbidden didn't always mean banned by law. Often it meant suspect in tone, suspect in use, or simply beyond a reader's rank to judge alone. The wrong text in the wrong hands could unmoor a village faster than rumor. A compendium like this lowers risk by pairing breadth with guardrails. If you turn from a remedy to a confession guide, you remember why you're reading at all. The nickname Devil's Bible enters later, as travel and courtly talk amplify this single shocking image. It's branding that leans on fear and sells speed. But inside the boards, the content is orthodox. Vulgate, scripture, Josephus, rules, calendars, remedies, chronicles, no conjurations, no secret alphabets, no rights to bend will. The forbidden you meet here is pride, not pages. That's the calm debunk that evidence keeps repeating. Speaking of fear, the Church didn't reject curiosity outright. It trained it. Teachers warned against curiositis knowledge as display, knowledge that pulls you away from duty but praised studiositis knowledge as craft and worship. The Codex gives you the tools to practice the second. You can feel that ethic in the hand, clarity over sparkle, function over flourish. A proud book shows off. This one works. Consider a reader's dilemma in a small scene. You need advice for a fever in the infirmary. You open the medical section, find a draft, and prepare it. On the way back, your eye catches a rubric for a psalm or a counsel on fasting. You take both the cure and the frame. That double move keeps knowledge from going feral. It tethers use to meaning. The book teaches that choreography by proximity. The devil portrait returns here as method, not myth. Place fear in view. Name it. Frame it. Then continue. That's what a moral diagram does. It doesn't ban the page. It steadies the hand that turns it. In a world where hunger, plague, and war pressed hard, people needed knowledge more than ever. They also needed language to hold knowledge responsible. The Codex sits precisely on that seam. Open loops help communities remember the lines. A prior might say, "We'll read Josephus to learn context, but we'll read it after Compline to keep hearts quiet." A confessor might advise, "Learn remedies, but don't sell them for pride." A scribe might copy a rule, then copy a cure to model that balance. The book becomes a script for living with tools that could help or harm. You can hear the same debate echo today under new names. Curiosity can be a scroll into distraction or a path into skill. The old pairing still applies. When you feel a tug toward knowledge for applause, you're in curiositis. When you feel the tug toward knowledge for care, you're in studiositis. The Codex won't decide for you. It lays both paths on the table and lights a candle. So where does forbidden pages end? With a simple rule: context makes permission. Inside this giant, context is everywhere. Scripture sets tone. Penance sets humility. History sets time. Medicine sets care. Each part keeps the others honest. That's how a book with a devil at its center stays safe. Its center warns. Its spine guides. Its margins breathe. Hold the lesson in one line you can carry. Steady work, rightly ordered, turns fear into wisdom. The devil's Bible only becomes devilish when pride reads alone. Read it together, read it humbly, and its so-called forbidden pages become a lamp. Let the page rest, then turn. Library of Shadows. Cousins and counterpoints. Tonight, let's walk the shelves beside the giant and meet its strange cousins. Not family by blood, but by rumor. Each one casts a different kind of shadow, and together they help you see what the Codex Gigas isn't with Icinium. Press the manuscript everyone whispers about when secrets are mentioned. A book dense with plant drawings that don't match known species. Lines of looping script no one has read with confidence. Pages washed with green and blue. It lives by its refusal to yield meaning. That mystery draws eyes and theories. Set it next to the Codex and the contrast steadies you. The giant is clear. Columns breathe in Latin you can pass. Sections declare themselves in red. Purpose it's plain. Scripture, history, medicine, rule. Where the unreadable cousin invites speculation, the Codex invites use. Speaking of edges, there's another book that collectors recall when they talk about learned magic. Its pages mix letters with number tables and fragments that point to angelic names. A kind of courtly curiosity about the structure behind things. It stands at the boundary where mathematics meets ritual, where a scholar's desk touches a seer's. The Codex doesn't walk that path. Its arrays are calendars and lists, not ciphers meant to open a hidden gate. If you need a recipe for a draft, you get one. If you need a psalm, you get one. The hinge turns toward order. Then there are grimoires, the small manuals of practice that most people mean when they say forbidden book. These tend to be portable, late, and blunt. They list circles to draw, names to call, days to avoid, steps to follow. They're tools for private rites, not public teaching. Hold one of those in your pocket and you're hiding a craft. Hold the Codex and you're holding a library that wants witnesses. The difference is scale, but also ethic. One promises power, the other promises structure. How do these shadows grow? Rarity plus rumor is enough. A traveler sees a single shocking image or hears a half-explained title in a dim hall and repeats it with a twist. Over time, Exotica turns into Cursed. A book that's simply hard to move becomes heavy with fate. A page that warns against pride becomes proof of a pact, because that version flies faster. The game of retelling prefers the sharp hook. This is why counterpoints matter. When you place the codex among these neighbors, you learn to read beyond nicknames. The giant is old. Yes, it's large. Yes, it bears a devil portrait that arrests the eye. But its voice is didactic, not occult. It teaches in broad daylight. It trusts a reader to proceed slowly through sacred lore, practical cure, and steady time. It asks you to live by it, not to conjure with it. Meanwhile, scholars use cousins as mirrors. The unreadable script asks a question about meaning, what happens to all when you can't decode it. The learned magic tables ask a question about method when does inquiry shade into right. The grimoires ask a question about purpose, what do you want knowledge to do in your hands. Every answer pushes the codex further into focus as an elder giant with a public face and a moral spine. There's also a social angle. The more legible and communal a manuscript is, the more it sits on a lectern in a shared room. The more private and esoteric, the more it hides in a chest. The codex has lived most of its life in rooms built for many eyes, even when only a few turned its pages. That setting shapes behavior. A public book trains modesty. A private manual tempts secrecy. The nickname Devil's Bible tries to flip that truth, but the daily use keeps flipping it back. Think of this like a map. Each cousin marks a region mystery without access. Access tilted toward ritual, instruction aimed at hidden effect. The codex marks a fourth. Knowledge braided for common life. When someone points to a rumor and asks you to classify a manuscript by its shadow, you can answer with these corners. It helps you hold judgment until you see the page. So what do these comparisons give you at night as the candle burns low? They offer a calm rule. Before you fear a book, read its intent. Before you praise a book, test its care. The Codex Gigas passes that test in the open. It's vast, legible, and morally didactic. It invites a crowd and sets a pace. In the present, it rests in careful light, watched and studied. We continue. Preservation and access. A modern afterlife. Tonight, the giant lives in calm air. Steady light, soft hands. You meet it in a room tuned for survival rather than spectacle. Temperature is kept cool and even. Humidity sits in a narrow band so vellum doesn't swell or sink. Light is rationed. Minutes count. The codex breathes slowly now, and caretakers listen. We continue. Stewardship begins with handling. Staff turn leaves with a support beneath. A cradle set to match the opening angle so the spine doesn't strain. Cotton or clean, bare hands either way. No oils, no rush. Weights that look like small snakes, soft, filled hold pages without bruising them. A checklist clears every session. Position stable, light measured, time noted. The ritual isn't fussy. It's respect turned into steps. Storage is shelters. The codex rests flat, not upright, in a case built like quiet armor. Inert materials, No acids, no fumes. The box seals against dust. Inside, the book sits on a support that cradles the boards and keeps edges from bearing the load. Moving the giant is planned, with carts cushioned and routes cleared, doors measured, corners flagged. Even a short trip is mapped like a procession. Conservation follows an ethic. Stabilize, don't erase. Scars remain. The warped clasp from fire's history stays documented. Small tears receive Japanese tissue, toned to match, but not to disappear. Adhesives are reversible. Every edition is logged with date, method, and materials, so a future conservator can lift a mend without guessing. The goal is to slow time, not to turn back clocks. The Codex keeps its biography. Digitization opens the leaves to the world. Under a gentle rig, lights balanced and cool. Each folio is photographed with care. Color targets sit in the frame. Rulers, too. Images are checked against the page for focus and scale. Then they're served online so anyone, anywhere, can turn the giant from home. Scrolling becomes page-turning. Zoom becomes a lens. You can stand where scholars stand without touching the skin. We continue. Public access grows wider with these scans. Students read Josephus for class. A nurse on a night shift peeks at a calendar and smiles at a saint's day she remembers from childhood. A calligrapher studies letter forms to copy the rhythm into her own hand. This is the gentlest victory of technology. It lowers the cost of attention. The room stays quiet. The audience expands. Exhibitions still happen, but sparingly and with condition. The giant travels rarely, if at all, when it's shown. A single opening is chosen for weeks, not days, to limit turns. Labels choose words that steer myth toward meaning. Forbidden books becomes context, not lures. Visitors learn how heat from breath matters. They watch a staff member close the leaf with a patient palm. The display teaches care as much as content. Curation frames understanding. A label near the devil portrait notes iconography and place in moral teaching, not pacts. A panel near the medical leaves explains humoral theory and its practical reach. Another panel names the fire and points out the scar without claiming miracle. Clear text lowers rumor. People leave with a story that sits well in daylight. Behind the scenes, monitoring is constant. Data loggers record climate, alerting staff if humidity drifts. Pest traps hide in corners, checked on a schedule. Light exposure is tracked in hours, a ledger of photons. When thresholds approach, the book rests in darkness for a season. Care is a rhythm, not a stunt. The team thinks in decades. Online fantasies try to sprint ahead. Claims of new pages discovered, secret updates, or hidden folios circulate now and then. Catalogs and scans answer calmly. Folio counts match. Bindings show no gaps. Marginal notes are documented. When something new appears, a re-identified source, a newly noticed correction, it's announced with references, not with flame. The digital record anchors the talk. Access policies balance welcome with duty. Scholars can request viewings under supervision for specific questions. A screen can't answer ink, gloss, hairside, versus flesh side, texture, sewing. Appointments are short. Requests are triaged by impact and need. Each session adds a line to the log, a quiet continuity that future keepers will read when we're gone. We continue. Educate extends the circle. Workshops teach how vellum moves with weather, how inks age, how a quill sings when cut right. Families visit open days where a replica leaf can be touched. Kids learn why we don't touch the real thing. Respect becomes a habit early, which is how books like this find friends in the next century. The Codex's modern afterlife is simple to say and hard to do. Keep it safe, keep it seen, keep it honest. Safety means stable air and careful hands. Seen means digitized pages and rare, thoughtful displays. Honest means labels that favor evidence over thrill. In that triangle, the giant rests well. So tonight, if you visit from your room, know that your scroll is part of its care. The more people can read it without touching it, the longer it will speak. After the facts, we're left with what the book says about us. That patient attention, shared widely, is a kind of mercy. What the giant teaches, meaning without myth. Tonight, let's sit with the lesson the giant keeps offering. Not the whisper of a pact, the plain shape of a life spent turning lines. One hand, one room, against a mountain of text. Human scale versus giant aim. You feel the gap and the bridge at once. The bridge is patience. The book says it softly. Steady work moves weight. We continue. Knowledge here is braided, soul, body, and state in one binding. Scripture sets tone, Josephus sets time. Medicine sets care, rules set repair. Calendars set rhythm, chronicles set place. No strand claims the whole. The braid holds because each part checks the others. That's a worldview intact, not a collage. You read and breathe with it, and your day starts to copy its order. The devil at the center is a guardian, not a lure. Fear trained, not fear fed. The page names danger, frames it, and lets you close the leaf. That habit scales. Name your dread. Give it edges. Return to your work. The Codex teaches this by page turn alone. It's a craft lesson for the mind. Show the monster the door, then keep writing. Endurance sits in the binding. War tried to make it an emblem of triumph. Fire tried to make it ash. Neglect tried to make it brittle. Use and care pulled it through. You can track that survival in metal scars, in board rub, in repaired tears. The book didn't outwit fate. People helped, hands lifted, choices landed. That's a quiet kind of hope. It says history isn't just what happens, it's what we save. Meaning grows from restraint. The scribe kept showy flourishes rare color points. It doesn't shout. Layout holds a tired reader. That ethic carries forward. Design as service. If you've ever tidied a desk to think straight, you already know the feeling. The giant models tidiness at scale. It calms by making space to be human inside something large. What do you carry from this into your room tonight? A simple tempo. Big things are solved by small, repeatable hours. Your stream is crossed stone by stone. Your fear is faced in daylight and returned to its frame. You don't need secrets. You need a rule you can keep. The Codex embodied a rule. Start, continue, stop well, return. The giant also argues for mixed knowledge. Keep tools nearby that speak to each other. Let a timeline sit next to a cure. Let a law rest beside a psalm. You won't turn your house into a monastery, but you can keep your thinking braided. When you do, pride has less room to posture. The braid tugs you back to purpose. There's comfort in limits. The scribe wrote within lines. He ruled himself. The freedom didn't vanish. It focused. You can see it in the long consistency that still feels alive. That's a useful mirror. Set lines that protect your attention. Walk inside them until your hand finds its own rhythm. Boundaries aren't walls. They're guardrails on a mountain road. The myth of the one-night miracle fades here without losing wonder. Decades of careful effort are more wondrous than a shortcut. They're repeatable. You can test them. You can live by them. The book's size stops being a stunt and becomes a record of kept promises. Promise to arrive. Promise to care for your tools. Promise to tell the truth when you miss a line and fix it the right way. Those promises add up. Community frames the lessons. One scribe, yes, but with a house behind. Hymn donors, cooks, novices, priors, readers. Big work is plural, even when the pen is singular. You feel that when you remember the throw from the window. Many hands, one decision. The Codex asks you to see your own work that way. Guard the part you hold. Thank the part you don't. The giant's quiet theology of attention reaches beyond belief. Attend, and things hold. Ignore, and they fray. That's true for vellum, for friendships, for cities. The book can't make you patient, but it can make patience look practical. It wears patience like armor. It also models honest memory. Scars remain. No one polished away the throw. No one painted over the rough. The past is safer when it shows its seams. You trust what you can see. The giant's afterlife in careful light proves that transparency protects as well as glass. So meaning without myth sounds like this. Do the slow thing well with others, in the open. Let fear be a signpost, not a driver. Keep your tools simple. Keep your pages tidy. Let knowledge braid. Let scars teach. Not a pact to promise that steady work shapes memory. The rain returns outside. The candle runs low. The last page waits for your hand. We continue. Lives around the giant. The scribe pauses, sands a line, reshapes the quill's edge, and waits for the ink to dry. The candle trembles once, then steadies. He whispers the next word, sets it down, and breathes. A novice nearby traces a scarlet capital with a fingertip, mouthing each curve. The letter opens like a door, and what enters will never leave. Centuries later, in Prague, a courtier leans close to the famous page, glimpses the devil's grin, and snaps the book shut. His heart stumbles, his laugh thin and nervous, echoing off the vaulted room. In 1648, soldiers heave the giant between them, backs bent and jaws set. For a moment, the weight pulls them into silent labor, binding strangers faster than trust. In 1697, smoke thickens the royal libraries. A librarian meets another man's eyes across the haze, nods once and lets go. The Codex arcs through rain and air, strikes stone and lives. In a modern lab, a conservator coaxes a torn fiber back into place, the thread crossing vellum like a heartbeat repaired, breath held, released. And somewhere tonight, a reader scrolls through a glowing facsimile. Between clicks, the room grows quiet. Even distance carries reverence. History waits, alive in careful hands. Myths and measures, what the evidence says, printed written in one night, unravels understudy. Letter forms flow with the rhythm of years, not ours. The choir structure hums with long, patient labor. Devilish ink or skin dissolves under chemistry ongling, calfskin, vellum, and simple pigments, ordinary tools, extraordinary persistence. Hidden cipher gives way to plain Latin. The abbreviations are familiar. The only secret is in cursed object shrinks to common wrist damp flame. Neglect the same fates that test every book left to time. And the word grimoire, it misleads. Within these covers lie scripture, history, law, medicine, and calendar knowledge, shared, not hoarded. As for many hands, the pages disagree. Paleography shows one calm voice moving steadily across decades. The myth of a miracle night becomes the truth of a long, faithful craft. Take a breath. Let evidence steady wonder. Between pages, the quiet that holds everything together. Silence has its own language. You've heard it all along in the spaces between sentences, in the steady pause after a legend ends and a fact begins. It's the same silence that lived in the scriptorium centuries ago, where quills whispered and no one needed to fill the air to feel meaning. The Codex Gigas teaches through that silence. Each blank margin, each measured breath was part of the work. The monk who wrote it understood that quiet isn't absent, it's structure. Without it, words collapse on themselves. With it, they breathe. When you listen closely, every story of endurance carries that same pulse. The monk pausing before the next line, the soldier standing in the hush before the throw, the conservator waiting for the glue to set, the reader at home letting a single sentence linger before scrolling. They're all moments where stillness does the heavy lifting. The quiet between pages is where understanding lands. It's where admiration cools into peace and wonder settles into gratitude. Not every lesson comes from text. Some come from the space it leaves for you. So as you reach the end of this journey, let the silence be part of it. Let it hold what words can't. Let it remind you that patience is not the absence of motion, it's motion made calm. The world outside may rush, but history waits. It waits for quiet hands and steady eyes. And when you give it both, it opens. Take a breath. Let the page rest. The last page turns, the giant closes softly, its breath folding back into the centuries. Ink, fear, and patience meet on the same parchment and hold. One hand answered darkness with work, and the world kept the echo. If this quiet journey eased your night, let it keep you company again. Save the story, share the calm, and let curiosity walk not run through the next forgotten hall of history. Whispering tomes is where patience and wonder still speak in candlelight. There are more books waiting, more strange histories that breathe when the world sleeps. Stay a while. Subscribe so the next story finds you when the fire is low and the night asks for company.